don't panic.
Huh? The perfect start.
I mean, if there's one piece of advice that really defined the life and career of Douglas Noel Adams, that's got to be it.
It is.
We are about to plunge headfirst into life, the universe, and, well, everything associated with one of the most brilliant, chaotic, and just fundamentally important humorists and thinkers of the late 20th century.
He was a colossal figure. And I mean that literally he was 6 feet 5 inches tall, but also, figuratively in terms of his cultural impact.
Absolutely.
He's best known, of course, for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it started as this scrappy little BBC radio comedy in 1978.
Right.
And then it morphed into this trilogy of 5 novels, which later became 6, then a TV series, a film, games. His work sold over 15 million copies just in his lifetime.
15 million copies of a story that, let's be honest, asks these incredibly profound philosophical questions, but they're all disguised as like absurd comedy about sentient mattresses and infinite improbability drives. But what's genuinely fascinating, and I think what our collected source materials really illuminate so well, is that the man who authored all that chaos was defined by 2 equally intense and very serious pursuits: radical atheism and an almost visionary obsession with technology and conservation.
Absolutely. The average person, they know Arthur Dent and the number 42, but they don't always connect that comedic genius to the man who was an Apple master, who pioneered ideas about hypertext before the web even exploded, and who personally risked life and limb, literally, to save the black rhino.
He was just a creature of contradictions. A procrastinating genius, a humorous philosopher, a technological evangelist.
All of it at once.
So our deep dive today is designed to give you a comprehensive shortcut to the whole man. We're going to unpack his struggle-filled career path, which, included working as a bodyguard and cleaning chicken sheds.
Which is just incredible to think about.
And we'll explore his massive influence on British science fiction, including his pretty controversial time as the script editor of Doctor Who. And finally, we'll really drill down into his radical beliefs that drove his activism and his technological innovations. Our mission is to synthesize all these diverse facets and really show why Adams's influence, from AI philosophy all the way to environmentalism, still profoundly shapes our world today.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Douglas Adams, beginning in Cambridge in 1952, it gave way pretty quickly to, instability.
Right. His parents divorced in 1957. His mother moved him and his sister first to the East End of London, and then eventually down to an RSPCA animal shelter in Brentwood, Essex.
Run by his grandparents.
Exactly, his maternal grandparents.
I mean, that sounds like a background that's almost tailor-made for producing a writer who specializes in slightly displaced, absurdly structured worlds.
It certainly provided an unconventional environment. You have to think living essentially on the grounds of an animal shelter, experiencing that kind of displacement and, this very strange domestic arrangement, it likely fostered an early observer status in him.
He was a watcher.
He was a watcher, absolutely, absorbing all the peculiarities of human behavior and animal behavior, which is fantastic training for a humorist.
And physically, he stood out tremendously. Our sources point out this was a huge factor in his early confidence issues.
Oh, yeah.
By age 12, he was already 6 feet tall. He eventually topped out at 6 feet 5 inches, or 1.96 meters.
And that height contributed directly to this deep-seated self-consciousness he carried throughout his entire life. We see this immense, witty, seemingly confident figure, but that exterior, it was masking constant anxiety.
Particularly about his ability to deliver.
Yes, which brings us to one of the most important moments of his formative years.
That aha moment we touched on, the single greatest moment of affirmation he ever received, right?
Yes. His form master at Brentwood School, a man named Frank Halford, awarded him the only score of 10 out of 10 he ever gave for creative writing.
The only one.
The only one. And Adams never, ever forgot this. It was an intellectual anchor for him, a piece of irrefutable evidence that he would clutch onto during those crushing periods of writer's block that really defined his professional life.
It's so powerful how one positive memory from childhood can sustain a creative person through decades of struggle. He basically used that score as proof that he was a writer, even when he couldn't write.
It was his permission slip.
He also honed his early comedic voice, contributing these spoof reviews to the school magazine, Broadsheet. The editor there was a guy named Paul Neal Mill Johnstone.
Oh, this is a great detail.
Who later became the model for the unfortunate Vogon poet whose work is so terrible.
It's classic Adams, taking real-life annoyances or acquaintances and just turning them into cosmic fodder.
And this blend of observational detail and, I guess, lofty ambition, that's what led him to St. John's College, Cambridge, in 1971.
It is. He went on what's called an exhibition in English, which is basically a scholarship.
Right, and the basis for it was an essay discussing two wildly disparate subjects, the Beatles and William Blake. That combination alone, it just defines his entire aesthetic, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's the synthesis of the sublime and the ridiculous, or maybe more accurately, high art and popular culture. He's taking the poetic, visionary scope of Blake and he's placing it right next to the revolutionary, accessible genius of the Beatles.
Which is exactly what Hitchhikers does. It uses the accessibility of genre fiction, of sci-fi, to talk about these huge, foundational, philosophical questions.
Precisely. And while he was at Cambridge, he quickly gravitated toward the famed student comedy club, the Footlights.
A crucial institution in British comedy.
Oh, a total hub for sketch comedy and reviews. It spawned multiple generations of performers, including, of course, the Python team.
Right, but his actual academic commitment, it suffered immensely because of this dedication to comedy.
It really did. He graduated in 1974 with a 2.2 in English literature, which, for context, is a respectable but not really an honors-level degree.
And the reason is what's striking. He confessed to completing only 3 essays in 3 years.
3 essays. It suggests this extreme dedication imbalance.
He was basically majoring in comedy and minoring in English.
And that early dedication brought him to the attention of Graham Chapman after a Footlights review appeared on BBC Two in 1974.
And this is where he achieved a genuinely remarkable distinction in comedy history.
He did. He contributed the patient abuse sketch to episode 45 of Monty Python's Flying Circus. That made him one of only 2 people who weren't original members to ever get a Python writing credit.
That is just heavy comedic royalty.
It really is.
And he wasn't just writing, he was briefly on screen in season 4 twice.
Once as Dr. Emil Coning, wearing a surgeon's mask, and then famously in a pepper pot outfit, loading a missile onto a cart.
An image almost as strange as anything he would later write. But this heady start, being a Python contributor, it was followed by a grinding reality check.
It was a brutal fallow period for him. After the Python connection ended, his career just stalled. Adams found that his unique, narrative-driven style of writing didn't immediately fit with the sketch-based, topical comedy trends of the time.
So what did that mean for him practically?
Severe financial strain, and a crushing blow to that low self-confidence we mentioned earlier.
So what kind of jobs did a future multi-million-selling author take to pay the bills during this time?
Oh, everything. He was a hospital porter, a barn builder, he cleaned chicken sheds.
Chicken sheds.
And the most outlandish one, he was a bodyguard for a Qatari family.
You're kidding. Can you imagine Douglas Adams, this towering, self-conscious genius, as a bodyguard?
It just highlights the sheer struggle and the desperation he was facing. This is the crucial prehistory of Hitchhikers.
And it's this pressure and struggle that gave birth to his most enduring and maybe his most honest quote about his creative process.
The line that every creative person understands on a gut level. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by.
It perfectly encapsulates that tension between his intellectual capacity and his professional procrastination.
It wasn't laziness. It was a form of paralysis, where the fear of not meeting his own incredibly high standards often prevented him from even starting. And this tendency, it would define his relationship with his editors and publishers for the rest of his career.
Okay, so now we get to the defining work. It's almost fitting that the genesis of a story about chaotic cosmic travel started with a moment of, well, chaotic personal travel. Let's go back to that famous 1971 Innsbruck incident.
Right. There are 3 key elements here. Adams lying drunk in a field in Innsbruck, Austria,
Staring up at the stars.
and carrying a copy of the actual Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe. He later recounted that the combination of the vast indifference of the night sky and the practical, user-friendly nature of this guidebook, it sparked the thought.
Somebody ought to write a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
That was it?
What's so incredible is how he transformed that drunken epiphany into an actual concrete proposal. By 1977, he and a producer, Simon Brett, successfully pitched a science fiction comedy radio series to BBC Radio 4.
And the success was immediate, but the production process was utterly frantic. The first radio series began broadcasting weekly on March 8th, 1978.
And he was writing right up to the wire.
Constantly. He had an outline, but the phrase, making up the stories as he wrote, is often cited. This constant high-pressure, last-minute writing environment defined the narrative chaos of the show itself. I mean, it feels spontaneous because, in many ways, it was.
That sounds like a creative nightmare, especially given his innate struggle with completion.
Oh, for sure.
And that environment, it necessitated collaboration. So here we see the introduction of John Lloyd.
Yes, who helped co-author the final 2 episodes of the first series, known as Fit the Fifth and Fit the Sixth.
So how significant was his contribution?
Lloyd was a crucial lifeline for the series to actually finish its initial run. He provided material, including concepts from an unpublished sci-fi book of his own called Gigax, just to help meet the deadlines. They later collaborated on those wonderfully absurd nonsense dictionaries, The Meaning of Life and The Deeper Meaning of Life.
But that relationship changed when Hitchhikers moved into novel form, right?
It did. While Lloyd was essential in that radio phase, Adams performed really significant rewrites when adapting the material for the novels and the TV series. He essentially reclaimed and reshaped those final radio episodes into what we now consider the canonical, consistent narrative.
So he minimized Lloyd's earlier contribution in those later formats.
He did. And it shows Adams' commitment to achieving a singular, cohesive, creative vision, even if that vision was built on a foundation of pure chaos.
The novelization process itself is where his struggles just became legendary. This is where he earned that deadline reputation. It wasn't just procrastination. It was truly agonizing for him.
It was creative agony, and it stemmed from perfectionism. The most famous anecdote, detailed in the source material, is the extreme measure taken by his editor, Sonny Mesa, to ensure the completion of So Long and Thanks for All the Fish.
He was physically locked in a hotel suite for 3 weeks.
Locked in?
Effectively held hostage by his own editor until the book was done. I mean, that's not normal literary composition. That's a commentary on the unique struggle of Douglas Adams.
It really underscores that the comedic genius came with a very high professional price. But despite this grueling process, he completed the 5-book trilogy.
Right. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in '79.
Then The Restaurant at the End of the Universe in 1980. Life, the Universe, and Everything in '82.
So Long and Thanks for All the Fish in '84. And then a long gap until Mostly Harmless in 1992.
And he just embraced the paradox. He eventually accepted the description of it as a 5-book trilogy.
And of course, the number 42, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. That became a key part of the book's branding.
It did. Yeah. And Adams was always eager to play with the format. In the 1990s, there was this photo-illustrated paperback edition, and he designed a 42 puzzle, which was incorporated into the covers of the first 4 novels.
So he turned the books into interactive objects.
Yes. It reinforced that feeling of cosmic mystery and playfulness. It wasn't just a number, it was an invitation to join the philosophical puzzle.
But while the books were flying off the shelves, the attempt to transition to the big screen became a decade-long nightmare, what he famously called his film frustration.
He started working on Hollywood adaptations as early as 1980, and he was completely ill-suited for the slow, decentralized, committee-driven world of Hollywood development.
He spent years just cycling through studios and scripts.
He did, and he had the perfect analogy for this grinding process and why it was so frustrating for him, the man who loved immediate, direct feedback from his Mac. He said that adapting the film was like trying to grill a steak by having a succession of people coming into the room and breathing on it.
That, quote, perfectly captures the anti-creative nature of Hollywood bureaucracy. It's the exact opposite of the instant feedback loops he championed in his digital work.
Precisely. Disney finally acquired the rights in 1998, but tragically, he passed away before the 2005 film was released.
Though he is credited posthumously as a producer.
He is. But the Hitchhiker saga didn't die with him.
Thankfully. The series returned to its original medium, radio, with the producer Dirk Maggs adapting the final 3 novels.
These were the tertiary, quandary, and quintessential phases broadcast in 2004 and 2005. And what makes these adaptations so poignant is the inclusion of Adams' own voice.
How do they manage that?
Maggs utilized a recording of Adams reading from Life, the Universe, and Everything, and he edited it to allow Adams to posthumously play the role of the character Agrajag.
Wow. That's a beautifully respectful way to ensure the author was present in the completion of his own work.
It really created a lasting emotional connection for the fans. The final episode concluded with a dedicated message. The very final episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is affectionately dedicated to its author.
So before Hitchhikers became his sole focus, Adams had this significant parallel career in British television, and it was notably with Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
And this, again, was a mixture of triumph and chaos, which seems to fit his brand perfectly.
He was definitely a lifelong fan. He submitted story ideas to the production office as early as 1976. One of those early concepts was a potential film script, Doctor Who and the Cricket Men.
And while that version didn't get made,
Adams, ever the recycler, brilliantly repurposed the core plot. You have this entire race bent on destroying the universe because they just hate the stars.
and he just dropped it into his third Hitchhiker's novel, Life, the Universe, and Everything.
Exactly. Recycling ideas wasn't just a convenience for Adams, it was an intellectual necessity, given his struggle to generate new material on demand.
And the BBC eventually brought him in. He served as the script editor for season 17 in 1979, starring Tom Baker.
Which is a phenomenal irony that we should probably discuss.
Go on.
How could a man who admitted to loving the whooshing noise of deadlines successfully serve as a script editor whose primary job is to impose and enforce deadlines on other writers?
That's a great question. I mean, he must have recognized the necessity of structure, even if he couldn't personally submit to it. Maybe editing was just easier for him than originating.
I think that's a very perceptive point. As an editor, he could focus his perfectionism on refining and shaping other people's work, rather than fighting the blank page herself.
So during his tenure, he wrote 3 serials.
He did. The first was The Pirate Planet, which introduced this complex mechanical world as part of the Key to Time arc.
Then we have City of Death, which is generally considered a classic, was co-written with the producer Graham Williams.
Right, but because of the incredibly tight production schedule, it had to be finalized really quickly, and it was aired under the pseudonym David Agnew.
The use of a pseudonym just speaks to the frenetic pace of production at the time.
It does. But City of Death is also famous for being the first Doctor Who story filmed overseas, in Paris, no less, and it achieved astonishing viewing figures. It just demonstrated Adams's knack for writing popular, high-concept drama.
But the most infamous serial of his tenure is Shoida.
Oh, Shoda!
It was only partly filmed due to strike action at the BBC and was never aired in its intended form. And Adams was reportedly very unhappy with the script anyway, feeling it was a patchwork.
Yeah, Shoda became this great lost gem of Doctor Who lore. Adams was so dissatisfied that when the existing footage was released on home media in 1992, he asked that his fee be donated to charity.
Wow.
But again, because the story was abandoned, it provided Adams with yet more material to cannibalize for his next major literary venture.
Which was, of course, the Dirk Gently novels. This is where he shifted from pure science fiction comedy to something more complex, more philosophical maybe.
Precisely. He reused elements of the Shaida plot, the Time Lord Sullivan, and the super prison in Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency in 1987.
Followed by The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul in 1988.
And these books allowed him to tackle themes of time travel, supernatural horror, and quantum mechanics in a way that Hitchhikers just didn't.
He gave this fantastic, chaotic description of Dirk Gently himself. He called it a kind of ghost horror, detective, time travel, romantic comedy epic, mainly concerned with mud, music, and quantum mechanics.
And that description, it highlights the central concept of the series, the holistic detective agency. Dirk gently operates on the belief that everything is fundamentally interconnected. So to solve a missing cat case, you might need to investigate the history of the universe or, quantum physics.
It's Adams taking the philosophical interconnectedness he explored through Bach's music and applying it to criminal investigation.
It is. It's the ultimate anti-Vogon philosophy, where Vogon bureaucracy represents this rigid, compartmentalized thinking. Dirk gently represents absolute chaotic interconnectedness.
And that tension is what makes the book so brilliant.
They probe the very fabric of reality using coincidence and absurdity as investigative tools. And even after his death, his ideas continued to influence Doctor Who. The future showrunner, Stephen Moffat, cited a story Adams pitched about the Doctor becoming a bitter recluse as inspiration for a 2012 Christmas special.
And his final unfinished work, The Salmon of Doubt, adds to this picture of constant creative recycling. It was published posthumously in 2002, containing 11 chapters of the novel, along with essays.
The estate believed it was intended as a new Dirk Gently novel, but Adams himself often mused about turning it into a 6th Hitchhiker's book.
So even at the very end, he was wrestling with which of his worlds best suited the ideas he was trying to articulate.
Exactly. It's a wonderful, though tantalizingly incomplete, snapshot of his ongoing thought process.
So we've established the chaotic genius of his creative life. But Adams was also defined by his intense commitment to, well, radical beliefs and bleeding-edge technology. He wasn't just some Luddite writer scribbling away. He was a futurist.
He was truly visionary. He didn't just adapt to technology, he embraced it, and he predicted its cultural implications. He bought his first word processor, a Nexu, back in 1982, which shows how early he adopted. But his real digital devotion, that began 2 years later.
And that devotion was to Apple.
Oh, completely.
He saw the Macintosh for the first time in Boston in 1984, and he just adored it. And this wasn't just brand loyalty, was it? It was a philosophical alignment.
It was a revolution for him. In 1984, most computing was command-line driven, difficult, and visually sterile. The Macintosh, with its graphical user interface, the GUI was friendly, it was intuitive, and crucially for Adams, it allowed for creativity and ease of use.
The antithesis of vogue bureaucracy.
Exactly, and his appreciation was so intense that he was reportedly the first person to buy a Mac in Europe.
The very first.
The very first, followed by his friend Stephen Fry. That's a serious claim to digital fame.
It is, and Apple recognized this pioneering status. They made him an Apple Master, which was basically as the spokesperson for the brand.
He was using the early builds of Mac OS X right up until his death in 2001. His final post to his online forum praised its potential, and he concluded with a single word: awesome.
So it shows his continuous enthusiasm for the tools that allowed him to bypass the agony of the typewriter and the manual submission process.
Yeah.
Technology was his antidote to writer's block.
It really was. And he didn't just use the technology, he evangelized its potential. In 1990, he wrote and presented a documentary called Hyperland. Now, 1990 is a key year. Why was this documentary so visionary?
It was visionary because he was advocating for hypertext, which is the foundational concept of the World Wide Web before the web was widely adopted by the public. Hypertext is the ability to link documents non-linearly, clicking from one piece of information to another.
So he was arguing for the structure of the modern internet, while the existing landscape was still largely fixed, linear, and bulletin board driven. Exactly. He saw the potential for interconnected, personalized, decentralized knowledge long before the browser wars even started. Hyperland even featured Tom Baker as a software agent, guiding the viewer through this prospective digital landscape.
It shows Adams wasn't just a humorist. He was an architectural thinker about information flow.
Yes. And this philosophical commitment to decentralized knowledge led directly to his digital ventures. He co-founded the Digital Village, which produced the BAFTA-nominated graphic adventure game Starship Titanic in 1998.
But his most direct attempt to realize his literary vision through technology was H2G2.
Right. Initiated in 1999, H2G2, which stands for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was a collaborative online project. It was an experimental, real-life effort to create a crowdsourced guide to the universe.
It was basically a wiki before Wikipedia, a communal project based on the very principles he discussed in Hyperland. He was trying to bring the fictional guide into reality by harnessing collective intelligence.
And this commitment to information and questioning is said to have influenced some of the biggest names in modern technology. There are strong claims that Elon Musk, who was an early funder of DeepMind, cited Adams as a major philosophical influence,
suggesting that deep thought, the supercomputer from his novel, inspired the name DeepMind.
Exactly. Musk reportedly called Adams the best philosopher ever, specifically emphasizing the difficulty of phrasing the question rather than obtaining the answer.
And that is the ultimate takeaway from the whole Hitchhiker's saga. The answer is 42, but the question is, what is 6 times 9? And it's profoundly complicated.
It is. Adams taught us that focusing on defining the problem, the ultimate question, is far more important than knowing the solution. And that's a principle that is absolutely foundational to AI development and research today.
So, moving from the digital to the audible, Adams was also profoundly committed to sound and music. He played left-handed guitar, studied piano.
And he amassed a collection of 24 left-handed guitars by the time of his death. Music was his primary creative outlet outside of writing. He loved Johann Sebastian Bach.
And his philosophical appreciation for Bach is perhaps the most quoted line from Dirk Gently, the famous Bach philosophy.
Yes. The character in Dirk Gently states, Mozart tells us what it's like to be human, Beethoven tells us what it's like to be Beethoven, and Bach tells us what it's like to be the universe.
So what did he mean by that?
What Adams meant here is that Bach's composition, with its intricate counterpoint, its mathematical precision, and its profound sense of order, it captured the underlying, often hidden logic and structure of the cosmos. It was the music of deep thought.
And his connection to Pink Floyd is legendary. It's hard to imagine two creators who blended complex philosophical ideas with immense spectacle better than Adams and Pink Floyd.
His love for their extravagant live shows inspired the fictional band Disaster Area in the restaurant at the end of the universe.
The band's so loud and spectacular that they crash a spaceship into a star as a concert stunt.
That's the one. And Adams was such a close friend of the band that he was invited to perform live with them at Earl's Court on his 42nd birthday.
And he contributed creatively to them as well, didn't he?
Right, he did. He suggested the name for their 1994 album, The Division Bell. He noticed the phrase, the division bell, lying within the lyrics to the track High Hopes, and pointed out that it would make a fantastic album title. It's a perfect example of his knack for synthesizing existing elements into something new and potent.
Now, let's pivot to his most intensely held, non-technological belief. It's radical atheism. He didn't just hold the belief, he championed it.
He was very specific about it. He labeled himself a radical atheist specifically to distinguish himself from agnostics who, claim certainty cannot be reached. Adams felt he had reached a definite conclusion.
But he was still fascinated by religion.
Oh, completely. Because of its profound effect on human affairs, he confessed he loved to keep poking and prodding at it.
And his greatest contribution to the public debate around atheism, and one of his best pieces of rhetorical thinking, is the puddle analogy. He used it to dismantle the fine-tuned universe argument.
Right. The fine-tuned universe argument suggests that because the conditions on Earth are so perfectly suited for human life, the distance from the sun, the atmosphere, all of that, it must have been deliberately created by a divine being.
And Adams countered this with the imagined sentient puddle.
Yes. The puddle wakes up in a hole and thinks, this is an interesting world I find myself in, an interesting hole I find myself in. Fits me rather neatly, doesn't it? In fact, it fits me staggeringly well. Must have been made to have me in it.
The power of that analogy is its sheer simplicity.
It just rhetorically dismantles the assumption of intentional design by demonstrating the circular reasoning. The environment fits the puddle because the puddle is defined by the environment. We exist where the conditions permit us to exist, and then we mistakenly believe the conditions were created specifically for us.
And this radical commitment to rational thought brought him into the circle of the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins.
Dawkins was a massive fan. He invited Adams to participate in his famous 1991 Royal Institution Christmas lectures to read a passage from the restaurant at the end of the universe. Years later, Dawkins dedicated his seminal work, The God Delusion, to Adams.
Affectionately calling him possibly my only convert to atheism.
Right. And that intellectual rigor also fueled his environmentalism. He saw conservation as a logical, necessary pursuit, and he became a tireless campaigner for endangered species.
His work with naturalist Mark Carberdine, resulting in the nonfiction radio series and book Last Chance to See in 1990, is just an incredible piece of reportage.
It really is. They traveled the world to visit species on the brink, including the cockroach parrot in New Zealand and the baji dolphin in China, highlighting their plight with Adams's characteristic mix of humor and despair.
They didn't just observe, they contributed. For instance, a passage from Last Chance to See called Meeting a Gorilla was included in the Great Ape Project, which argued for extending fundamental moral rights to all great apes.
And then, of course, we have the ultimate expression of Adams's blend of activism and absurdity.
The rhino suit climb.
The rhino suit climb. In 1994, he participated in a climb of Mount Kilimanjaro wearing a full rhino suit for Save the Rhino International.
This wasn't just a gimmick, was it?
Not at all. It was highly successful performance activism. He raised approximately 100,000 pounds for conservation programs in Kenya and Tanzania. That detail, a 6'5" radical atheist humorist climbing one of the world's highest mountains in a cumbersome animal costume, it perfectly synthesizes his entire persona. Committed, absurd, and ultimately effective.
And he managed to pack all of this creativity, this activism, and this technological exploration into just 49 years.
It's astonishing, really.
On the personal front, he married Jane Belson, a barrister, in 1991. She'd been referenced in the Jacket Flap biography of his books as the Lady Barrister in the mid-'80s.
They had one daughter, Polly Jane Rocket Adams, born in 1994, which was shortly after Adams turned 42.
A meaningful coincidence, perhaps?
Yeah, you'd have to think so. They moved the family from London to Santa Barbara, California in 1999, just 2 years before his life was tragically cut short.
The shock of his death was immense. He died so suddenly on May 11, 2001, at the age of 49. It happened after a regular workout at a private gym in Santa Barbara.
It was due to an undiagnosed case of coronary artery disease. Just an untimely and profound loss for the worlds of literature and science. The outpouring of grief really reflected his impact.
Richard Dawkins eulogized him.
He did. He noted that science has lost a friend, literature has lost a luminary, the mountain gorilla and the black rhino have lost a gallant defender. His remains were later cremated and his ashes interred at Highgate Cemetery in North London.
The tribute started coming even before his death was officially announced. In this poignant twist of cosmic timing, just 2 days before he died, the Minor Planet Center announced the naming of asteroid 18610 Arthurdent,
after his famously displaced protagonist.
Exactly.
And then in 2005, asteroid 25924 Douglas Adams was named in his memory. It ensures that the man who wrote about the entire universe now has his name permanently attached to the celestial bodies he loved to satirize.
But the most beloved, and I think the most quirky fan tribute, the one that encapsulates the humor and the practicality of his work, is Towel Day.
Towel Day is just wonderful. It's observed annually on May 25th, which is 2 weeks after his death. Fans worldwide carry a towel with them all day long.
All based on the novel's foundational advice that a towel is the most massively useful thing an interstellar hitchhiker can have.
It's a practical, humorous, and enduring memorial. It's perfect.
And his legacy continues through adaptations as well. The 2005 film adaptation, which was, divisive for some fans.
A little, yeah.
It incorporated design elements that referenced Adams himself.
Sure.
There was a large head-shaped planet seen near the end that was molded to reflect his features.
And the trilogy officially grew to 6 books with the support of his estate. The Irish author Eoin Colfer, who's famous for the Artemis Fowl series, released And Another Thing in 2009.
Which demonstrated the enduring commercial and creative viability of the universe Adams created.
It did. And finally, his commitment to activism is maintained through the annual Douglas Adams Memorial Lectures, held by Save the Rhino International since 2003.
So they ensure that his specific passion for conservation, that combination of absurdity and committed fundraising, continues to raise awareness and vital funds.
And for scholars who are interested in the genesis of his chaotic brilliance, his papers and archives are now held at St. John's College, Cambridge, providing this treasure trove of insight into his creative methods, his technological musings, and his lifelong struggle to meet a deadline.
So when we look at all these facets, the comedic writer who struggled with every single sentence, the script editor who couldn't keep his own deadlines, the radical atheist who was obsessed with finding the underlying order in Bach, and the technological evangelist who fought for rhinos, what stands out is the essential unity of his philosophy.
I think so too. He was unique in his ability to use absurdity and comedy to mask these truly profound philosophical questions. He utilized technology from the Mac to Hyperland and H2G2 as a mechanism for collective learning and community building.
Actively pushing against the bureaucratic and linear thinking he despised.
Exactly. Adams captured the absurdity of existence while demanding rational action and intellectual rigor from us.
The man who gave us the ultimate answer, 42, spent his entire professional life demonstrating that finding the answer is almost secondary to the intellectual struggle required to articulate the question. His legacy rests not on the specific jokes or plots, but on his holistic approach to the cosmos.
And that ultimately is the takeaway, isn't it? Adams, the technological prophet and the conservation champion, he understood that the value lies not in knowing the answer, but in our shared, ongoing human struggle to phrase the profound, ridiculous, and necessary questions about our place in the universe.
And in the face of that cosmic uncertainty,
Always remember the enduring usefulness of a towel.